Hey everyone. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, telling us where you're watching from. We'd love to hear your thoughts and keep the conversation going. The ultrasound wand pressed cold against Isabel's belly as she stared at the grainy black and white image on the monitor, her heart hammering against her ribs. 20 weeks. Halfway there. The technician's face had gone pale 3 minutes ago, and she'd excused herself twice to check something with the doctor. Ms. Davis, Dr. Chen's voice carried a tremor Isabel had never heard before as she entered the small examination room. The fertility specialist who had been so confident, so reassuring over the past months, now looked like she might be sick. I need to speak with you about something very serious. Isabel's grip tightened on the paper gown covering her exposed stomach. Is something wrong with the baby? No, the baby is perfectly healthy. Dr. Chen pulled up a chair, sitting closer than she ever had before. Isabel, there's been a mistake. A very serious mistake in our lab procedures. The words seemed to float in the air between them, not quite landing in Isabel's consciousness. She'd been a third-grade teacher for 8 years. She knew what it looked like when someone was about to deliver devastating news. The careful tone, the measured words, the way Dr. Chen's hands fidgeted with the clipboard. What kind of mistake? Dr. Chen took a shaky breath. The sperm sample used for your procedure, it wasn't from your selected donor. The room tilted. Isabel felt the blood drain from her face as the implications crashed over her like a wave. Then whose? Mr. Frances Alderidge's. Isabel had never heard the name before, but something in Dr. Chen's expression told her she should have. The doctor was looking at her with a mixture of pity and terror that made Isabel's skin crawl. Who is Frances Alderidge? He's a very prominent businessman. A billionaire, actually. He and his partner were using our services, and there was a mix-up in the lab. A catastrophic error in our labeling system. Dr. Chen's voice cracked. Isabel, I am so deeply sorry. This should never have happened. Our protocols. A billionaire? Isabel's voice came out as a whisper. She thought of her tiny apartment in Detroit, her student loan debt, the way she'd saved for 2 years just to afford this single round of IVF. You're telling me I'm carrying some rich white man's baby? The baby is yours, Isabel. You're the mother. But yes, biologically Mr. Alderidge is the father. Isabel stared at the ceiling tiles, counting the small holes in the white panels as her world reorganized itself around this impossible reality. She'd chosen donor 847 so carefully, African American, college-educated, healthy medical history. She'd wanted her child to look like her, to share her heritage. Now, does he know? We've informed him, yes. He's as shocked as you are. Isabel let out a laugh that sounded more like a sob. Shocked? Right. I bet he is. She could imagine it. Some entitled billionaire finding out his genetic material had been wasted on a black school teacher from the inner city. What does he want? Dr. Chen hesitated, and Isabel knew the answer would be bad. He'd like to meet with you. To discuss the situation. Discuss. Isabel sat up straighter, her protective instincts flaring. This is my baby, Dr. Chen. I don't care how much money this man has. Of course, no one is questioning your rights as the mother. But legally, given the circumstances. Dr. Chen trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Isabel's hand moved instinctively to her belly, where her daughter was growing strong and healthy. She'd felt her first kicks just last week, had stayed up nights imagining their life together. Single motherhood would be challenging, but she'd been prepared for that. This was something else entirely. 3 months ago, Isabel said quietly, I was just a teacher trying to have a baby. I saved every penny, worked summer jobs, sold my grandmother's jewelry to afford this procedure. I picked out names, bought books about raising a daughter alone. I was so careful about everything. She looked down at the ultrasound printouts scattered on her lap, grainy images of tiny hands and feet, a perfect profile, the curve of a spine. Her daughter. No matter what some lab error said, this was her daughter. Now you're telling me that my baby is connected to some billionaire who probably thinks I'm trying to trap him or something. Mr. Alderidge seems to be a reasonable man. Reasonable? Isabel's voice rose. Dr. Chen, do you understand what this means for me? For my child? This isn't just about money or custody. This is about 2 completely different worlds that were never supposed to intersect. She thought about her students, mostly Black and Latino kids from families that struggled to make ends meet. She thought about her mother, who cleaned office buildings downtown and had been so proud when Isabelle became a teacher. She thought about Frances Alderidge, whoever he was, probably living in some mansion, making more money in a day than she'd see in a lifetime. "When do I meet him?" she asked, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "Tomorrow if you're willing. 2 o'clock. Isabelle nodded, her hands still protective over her belly. Whatever happened next, she would face it head-on. She'd fought for everything she had in life, her education, her career, her independence. She wouldn't stop fighting now. Not when she was fighting for two. Isabelle arrived at the downtown law office 15 minutes early, her palms sweating despite the October chill. She'd spent the morning agonizing over what to wear, finally settling on her best black dress, the one she wore to parent-teacher conferences and school board meetings. Professional but not trying too hard. She needed to project strength, not desperation. The reception area screamed money in that understated way rich people preferred. Marble floors, leather furniture that probably cost more than her car, and abstract art that made no sense but looked expensive. Isabelle perched on the edge of a chair, her teacher's instincts cataloging everything. Escape routes, power dynamics, potential allies. The receptionist, a young white woman with perfect teeth, kept glancing at her with barely concealed curiosity. At exactly 2 o'clock, a door opened and Dr. Chen emerged, followed by a man in an impeccably tailored suit. Isabelle's first thought was that Frances Alderidge looked nothing like what she'd imagined. She'd pictured someone older, more imposing, the kind of billionaire who appeared on magazine covers with slick back hair and a predatory smile. Instead, he appeared to be in his early 30s, tall and lean, with dark hair that looked like he'd been running his hands through it. His face was drawn with stress, and when their eyes met across the room, she saw something she hadn't expected: uncertainty. "Miss Davis," he said, crossing to her with measured steps. His voice was cultured but not affected, with just a hint of what sounded like Boston accent. "Frances Alderidge. Thank you for agreeing to meet." He extended his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Isabelle shook it. His grip was firm but brief, and she noticed he didn't try to hold on longer than necessary or give her one of those patronizing two-handed shakes some men favored. Point in his favor, though she wasn't ready to award many of those yet. "Miss Davis," she corrected gently but firmly. "Not Isabelle. Not yet. Maybe not ever." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course. Shall we?" He gestured toward a conference room where 2 other people waited. A woman in her 50s who screamed corporate lawyer, and a younger man taking notes on a tablet. Isabelle followed them in, her heels clicking on the polished floor. The conference table could have seated 20. They clustered at one end like strangers at a bus stop. Dr. Chen looked miserable, the lawyer looked calculating, and Frances Alderidge looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Before we begin," Isabelle said, settling into her chair and placing her purse deliberately on the table, "I want to make something clear. I'm here because Dr. Chen asked me to come, and because I believe in handling difficult situations directly. But my baby," she paused, letting the possessive pronoun hang in the air, "is not a problem to be solved or a situation to be managed." The lawyer, who'd introduced herself as Margaret Kessler, leaned forward. "Miss Davis, we certainly don't view." "I wasn't speaking to you," Isabelle said coolly, her gaze fixed on Frances. "I was speaking to him." Frances raised a hand, stopping his lawyer mid-sentence. "You're right," he said quietly. "This isn't a business negotiation, despite the setting." He looked around the sterile conference room with what might have been distaste. "Perhaps we could have met somewhere less formal." "But we're here now," Isabelle said. "So let's talk." Frances nodded, seeming to gather himself. "First, I want you to know that I hold Dr. Chen's clinic fully responsible for this situation. My legal team will be pursuing every avenue to ensure this never happens to anyone else." "That's not what I want to talk about." "What do you want to talk about?" Isabelle took a breath, feeling the weight of her daughter moving inside her, a flutter that had become as familiar as her own heartbeat. "I want to know what kind of man you are. Because like it or not, you're going to be connected to my child forever." The directness of the question seemed to catch him off guard. He was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming once against the table before he caught himself. "I'm not sure how to answer that. Try honesty." Francis glanced at his lawyer, who gave him a warning look, then back at Isabel. I'm 32 years old. I inherited my father's company when I was 25 and have been trying to prove I deserved it ever since. I work too much, sleep too little, and according to my sister, I have the social skills of a particularly awkward penguin. Despite herself, Isabel felt the corner of her mouth twitch. I've never been married, he continued, though I was engaged until recently. My ex-fiancée and I were using Dr. Chen's services because... He paused, vulnerability flickering across his face. Because we've been trying for 3 years with no success. Turns out the problem wasn't medical compatibility. She left you? She decided that someone who works 16-hour days and considers a weekend in the Hamptons a vacation probably shouldn't be a father. His smile was rueful. She wasn't wrong. Isabel studied his face, looking for signs of deception or manipulation. She taught third graders long enough to become an expert at detecting lies. What she saw instead was exhaustion and something that looked like loneliness. My turn, Frances said. What kind of woman are you? Isabel straightened. I'm a third-grade teacher at Marcus Elementary in Detroit. I've been there 8 years. I coach the after-school reading program and run the weekend tutoring sessions. I grew up 3 blocks from where I teach now, raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat. She paused, then continued. I saved for 2 years to afford this procedure because I wanted to be a mother more than anything else in the world. I chose a donor carefully, planned everything down to the nursery colors. I've read every parenting book in the library and probably half the ones on Amazon. Why now? Why alone? The question was quiet, curious rather than judgmental. Because I'm 29 years old, financially stable, and tired of waiting for Prince Charming to show up and give me permission to start my life. Isabel's voice carried the weight of a decision made long ago and thoroughly examined. I don't need a man to make me complete, Mr. Alderidge. I just wanted a baby. And now you're having one. Mine. No, Isabel said firmly. I'm having mine. You contributed genetic material. There's a difference. Francis was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, less formal, more human. You're right. But I'd like to be involved if you'll let me. Not to take over or control anything, but I never thought I'd be a father. Now suddenly I am one. I don't want to miss it. Isabel looked at this man across the table, this stranger who was somehow connected to the most important thing in her world, and realized they were both terrified. The difference was she'd chosen this terror. He'd had it thrust upon him. We'll see, she said finally. We'll see. The first photographer appeared outside Marcus Elementary on a Wednesday morning, telephoto lens trained on the school entrance like a weapon. Isabel spotted him from her classroom window during first period, her stomach dropping as she watched him adjust his equipment. By lunch there were 3 more. Girl, you need to see this. Keisha, the 4th grade teacher next door, burst into Isabel's classroom during her prep period, phone in hand. They're calling you Mystery Baby Mama on Twitter. Isabel's hands went cold as she stared at the screen. The photo was grainy but unmistakably her, taken yesterday as she left her prenatal appointment. The headline read, Billionaire Frances Alderidge Secret Baby Scandal. How did they? Isabel sank into her chair, one hand instinctively moving to her belly. At 22 weeks, her pregnancy was obvious now, impossible to hide under loose clothing. Someone at that fancy clinic probably sold the story, Keisha said, settling on the edge of Isabel's desk. Question is, what are you gonna do about it? Before Isabel could answer, her phone rang. Frances Alderidge's name appeared on the screen. She'd added his number after their meeting, though she hadn't used it yet. This is Isabel. Have you seen the news? His voice was tight with controlled anger. Just did. I'm assuming you didn't leak it? God, no. My PR team is in full crisis mode trying to figure out the source. Isabel, Ms. Davis, I'm sorry. This is exactly what I hoped to avoid. Isabel looked out her window again. The photographers had multiplied, and now she could see a news van pulling up to the curb. Well, it's too late for that now. I'm having my security team escort you home after school. And I'd like to arrange protection for you if you'll accept it. Protection. Isabel's voice rose. What kind of life do you live that you need security teams? There was a pause. The kind where everything you do becomes public property. Where people think your personal business is their entertainment. His voice softened. I know this isn't fair to you. None of this is fair to you. After school, Isabelle found herself sandwiched between two large men in dark suits as they walked her to a black SUV with tinted windows. The reporters shouted questions about her relationship with Francis, about whether she'd planned to get pregnant, about whether she was after his money. One particularly aggressive photographer pushed forward, camera clicking rapidly, until one of the security guards stepped smoothly into his path. Miss Davis, is it true you're demanding millions in child support? Did you know who the father was before the procedure? How does it feel to win the baby lottery? Isabelle kept her head down, jaw clenched against the urge to shout back at them. These people didn't know her students who depended on her, didn't know how hard she'd worked for everything she had. To them, she was just another woman trying to get rich off a wealthy man. The SUV pulled up to her apartment building in Corktown, and Isabelle's heart sank. More photographers waited outside her door, along with curious neighbors and what looked like a local news crew. Mrs. Patterson from 2B stood on the front steps in her housecoat, clearly enjoying the drama. This is insane, Isabelle muttered. It'll die down, said Marcus, the lead security guard. Give it a week or two. Something else will grab their attention. But as they hurried her through the crowd, Isabelle heard someone shout, "There she is! The teacher who hit the jackpot." Inside her apartment, Isabelle dead-bolted the door and leaned against it, finally allowing herself to feel the full weight of what was happening. Her phone had been buzzing constantly. Reporters, distant relatives she hadn't heard from in years, former college roommates wanting the real story. She'd stopped answering after the fifth call. The apartment felt smaller somehow, like the walls were closing in. She'd always loved her little one-bedroom place. The exposed brick, the vintage fixtures, the view of the Detroit skyline from her kitchen window. It was hers, paid for with her own money, decorated with furniture she'd saved up for piece by piece. Now it felt like a hiding place. Her phone rang again. "Frances, how are you holding up?" "I've been better." Isabelle moved to her couch, sinking into the worn cushions. "How long does this usually last?" "Depends. If we give them nothing to work with, they'll eventually move on to the next scandal. But Isabelle, there's something else. The story is evolving." "What do you mean?" "They're digging into both our backgrounds. Someone leaked details about your IVF procedure, your financial situation. And they're painting a particular picture." Isabelle's stomach clenched. "What kind of picture?" "The gold digger angle. Poor teacher gets accidentally pregnant by billionaire, decides to cash in." His voice was carefully neutral, but she could hear the anger underneath. "It's complete bullshit, obviously, but it's a good story." Isabelle felt suddenly exhausted. The scheming woman who trapped the rich man. "Never mind that I didn't even know who you were before last week. I'm having my team prepare a statement. Something about respecting privacy, focusing on the child's well-being. But Isabelle, they're going to keep coming at you. This is what they do. They find an angle and they push it until people get bored." Isabelle looked around her apartment, at the stack of papers she needed to grade, at the baby name books on her coffee table, at the ultrasound photos stuck to her refrigerator. Her quiet, carefully constructed life had been turned inside out in a matter of days. "I need to think about my students," she said finally. "This circus can't follow me to school. These kids don't need their teacher turning into some tabloid curiosity." "I understand. What can I do to help?" The question caught her off guard. In all the chaos, she'd been bracing for demands, expectations, legal maneuvers. She hadn't expected offers of help. "I don't know yet. But Frances." "Yes." "Next time we meet, can it be somewhere normal? Like a coffee shop or something? All these lawyers and conference rooms make me feel like I'm being processed instead of heard." There was a pause, then something that sounded almost like relief in his voice. "I'd like that. There's a place in Midtown near the art museum. Quiet, good coffee. Would tomorrow work?" "Tomorrow's Saturday. I have tutoring until 3. 4 o'clock then?" Isabelle found herself agreeing before she'd fully thought it through. After she hung up, she sat in her darkening apartment, listening to the muffled voices of reporters still lingering outside. Her daughter moved restlessly inside her, as if sensing her mother's anxiety. "It's okay, baby girl," Isabelle whispered, her hand tracing circles on her belly. "We're going to figure this out. All of it." Outside, a camera flash lit up her window. Isabel closed the blinds and began planning how to explain to her third graders why their teacher was suddenly famous for all the wrong reasons. The roasting plant was exactly the kind of coffee shop Isabel had hoped for: exposed brick walls lined with local art, mismatched furniture that had clearly been collected over time rather than ordered from a catalog, and the comfortable buzz of Saturday afternoon conversations. She arrived 10 minutes early and claimed a corner table where she could watch the door, her teacher instincts preferring to see who was coming and going. Frances appeared at 4 o'clock sharp, and Isabel was struck again by how different he looked outside the formal conference room setting. He wore dark jeans and a navy sweater instead of a suit, and his hair was less perfectly styled. He looked younger, more approachable. Almost normal. "Thank you for choosing this place," he said as he sat across from her. "I was starting to think all my conversations happened in rooms with no windows." "You're welcome." Isabel wrapped her hands around her coffee mug, savoring the warmth. "How's the media circus on your end?" Frances grimaced. "My publicist has fielded 43 interview requests since Wednesday. Everyone wants the billionaire baby daddy angle." He caught her expression and quickly added, "Which I've declined, obviously. What about you?" "Someone from Good Morning America called my principal yesterday. Asked if they could film a segment about the teacher who changed a billionaire's life." Isabel shook her head. "I told Dr. Martinez to refer all media requests to my voicemail, which I'm not checking. I'm sorry this is happening to you. I know you didn't ask for any of this." Isabel studied his face. The apology seemed genuine, but she'd learned to be cautious about accepting surface emotions as truth. "Neither did you from the sound of it." "No, but I'm used to living under scrutiny. It comes with the territory." Frances took a sip of his coffee, then set the mug down carefully. "Can I ask you something? About your students." "What about them?" "Yesterday, my assistant pulled some information about Marcus Elementary. The test scores, funding levels, graduation rates." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Those kids are dealing with a lot." Isabel's defensive instincts flared immediately. "They're dealing with poverty, not incompetence. There's a difference." "That's not what I meant. Because if you're about to suggest that these kids need saving, or that their problems can be solved by throwing money at them, you can save your breath." Isabel's voice remained steady, but Frances could hear the steel underneath. "I've heard that speech before. Actually, I was going to say that they're lucky to have you." The response deflated some of Isabel's anger, but not her wariness. "How would you know?" Frances pulled out his phone and showed her the screen. "I looked up your school's website. There's a video from last year's reading celebration." He scrolled to find it. "You have a third grader named Jaden who couldn't read at the beginning of the year. By May, he was performing a poem he'd written himself. The look on his face when he finished." Frances shook his head. "That doesn't happen by accident." Isabel felt her cheeks warm. She remembered that day, remembered Jaden's proud grin and the way his grandmother had cried in the audience. "You watched our reading celebration?" "I watched all of it. The science fair videos too. And the footage from your weekend tutoring sessions." Frances looked slightly embarrassed. "I realize that probably sounds strange, but I wanted to understand your world. What matters to you? And what conclusion did you reach? That you're not just a teacher. You're a warrior fighting for those kids every single day. And you're winning battles that most people don't even know are being fought." Isabel sat back, surprised by the accurate assessment. "It's not always a battle. Sometimes it's just showing up, being consistent. A lot of these kids don't have many adults in their lives who do that. Is that why you wanted to be a mother? To give a child that consistency?" The question was personal, but something in his tone made it feel like genuine curiosity rather than prying. "Partly. But also because I love kids. I love watching them learn, seeing the moment when something clicks. I love their questions and their terrible jokes and the way they see the world before it gets complicated." Frances smiled. "Terrible jokes?" "Yesterday Marcus asked me why math books are always sad. When I said I didn't know, he said, because they're full of problems." Isabel found herself smiling at the memory. "He's been working on that one all week." "That's actually pretty good. Don't encourage him. He's already planning to be a comedian astronaut chef when he grows up." They fell into comfortable silence for a moment. Outside, Detroit moved at its Saturday afternoon pace. People walking dogs, families heading to Eastern Market, couples browsing the shops along Woodward Avenue. Normal life continuing despite the chaos that had erupted around them. "Can I ask you something now?" Isabelle said. "Of course. What do you actually do? I mean, I know you inherited your father's company, but what does that mean day to day?" Frances seemed to consider how to explain it. "We're primarily in technology and real estate development. Software solutions for large corporations, urban housing projects, some renewable energy investments. I spend most of my time in meetings, reviewing proposals, making decisions about where to put money and resources." "Do you like it?" "I'm good at it," Frances said carefully. "Which isn't the same thing, I know. What would you do if you could do anything?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. He was quiet for so long that Isabelle wondered if she'd overstepped. "I used to want to be a teacher actually," he said finally. "High school history. I loved reading about different periods, understanding how events connected to each other. But my father made it clear that wasn't a realistic option for someone in my position." "Your position?" "The heir to a business empire. The keeper of the family legacy." Frances's voice carried a note of old resentment. "I was groomed for one role, and that role doesn't leave room for personal preferences." Isabelle looked at this man across from her, wealthy beyond imagination but somehow trapped by that very wealth. "That sounds lonely." "It is." The admission seemed to surprise him. "I work with hundreds of people, attend dozens of social events, serve on multiple boards. I'm surrounded by people all the time, but most of them want something from me. Access, influence, money. It's rare to have a conversation where someone isn't calculating the angle." "Is that what you think I'm doing?" Frances met her eyes directly. "No. That's what makes this so unusual. You didn't want to meet me, didn't ask for my money, haven't tried to leverage this situation for personal gain. In my experience, that's uncommon." Isabelle felt a flutter of movement from the baby, as if she were reminding her mother of her presence. She placed her hand on her belly, a gesture that had become automatic. "How is she doing?" "The baby? She's active. Keeps me up at night with her gymnastics routines." Isabelle looked down at her hands. "Strong heartbeat, good growth rate. Dr. Chin says everything looks perfect." We don't know for sure yet, but I have a feeling. Call it mother's intuition." Frances was quiet for a moment, his eyes fixed on Isabelle's protective gesture. "Does she move when you're teaching?" "All the time. I think she likes the sound of children's voices. She's especially active during story time. Maybe she'll be a teacher too." "Maybe." Isabelle looked up at him. "What do you hope she'll be?" "Happy," Frances said without hesitation. "Whatever makes her happy." Isabelle realized exactly the right answer. Isabelle wasn't sure what possessed her to invite Frances to her neighborhood, but standing outside the Coney Island Diner on Michigan Avenue at 11 on a Tuesday morning, she was starting to regret the impulse. He'd asked if he could see where she lived, where she worked, and something in his voice had suggested genuine curiosity rather than voyeurism. Now, watching his driver pull away in the gleaming black Mercedes, Isabelle wondered if she'd made a mistake. Frances stood on the sidewalk in his expensive jeans and leather jacket, looking like an anthropologist who'd been dropped into an unfamiliar culture. "This is it," Isabelle said, gesturing toward the modest strip of businesses. "Tony's Coney Island, a beauty salon with faded awnings, a corner market with security grates, and a check-cashing place with bulletproof glass. Welcome to my world." Frances looked around with what appeared to be genuine interest rather than judgment. "How long have you lived here?" 3 years. "It's up and coming," Isabelle said with a slight smile. "Or so the real estate agents keep telling us." They walked slowly down the street, Isabelle pointing out landmarks. The community center where she sometimes volunteered, the small park where she took her lunch breaks when the weather was nice, the bus stop where half her students waited each morning. Frances listened without comment, but she noticed him paying attention to details. The boarded-up storefront, the group of older men playing chess at a makeshift table, the mural celebrating neighborhood heroes that someone had tagged over with graffiti. "The school's just 2 blocks that way," Isabelle said, pointing east. "You can walk there in about 8 minutes, which is good when your car decides not to start." "How often does that happen?" "Often enough that I keep jumper cables in my purse." Isabelle touched her belly, where the baby had been particularly active this morning. "I'll need to figure out something more reliable before she arrives." They paused at a corner where a small group of children played in a vacant lot that had been turned into an impromptu playground. Someone had installed a basketball hoop and painted hopscotch squares on the concrete. The kids ranged in age from about 6 to 12, and Isabel recognized two of them from school. Ms. Davis. A boy with a gap-toothed grin came running over. "You gonna have your baby soon?" "Not for a few months yet, Carlos. Are you staying out of trouble?" "Yes, ma'am. Mostly." He looked curiously at Frances. "Is that your boyfriend?" Isabel felt heat rise in her cheeks. "This is Mr. Alderidge. He's a friend." Carlos studied Frances with the unfiltered assessment that only children possessed. "You got nice shoes. They look expensive." "Thank you," Frances said gravely. "What's your favorite subject in school?" "Lunch," Carlos replied without hesitation, making Isabel laugh despite her embarrassment. "That was mine too," Frances admitted. "What about in class?" "Math, I guess. Ms. Davis makes it fun with the games and stuff." Carlos bounced on his toes. "You want to play basketball with us?" Isabel started to decline for him, but Frances surprised her. "I'm not very good, but sure." For the next 20 minutes, Isabel sat on a nearby bench and watched Frances attempt to play basketball with a group of kids who showed him no mercy. He was terrible, clearly more comfortable in boardrooms than on courts, but he kept trying, laughing when he missed shots and cheering enthusiastically when the kids made theirs. His expensive jacket came off after the first few minutes, and his careful haircut became disheveled from the effort. "He's not bad," said Mrs. Williams, settling on the bench beside Isabel. She was Carlos's grandmother and one of the neighborhood's unofficial mayors. "Little awkward, but he's trying. That counts for something." "He's not what I expected," Isabel admitted. "Rich folks usually aren't, one way or another. Either they're worse than you think or better. Rarely exactly what you expect." Mrs. Williams studied Frances as he attempted a free throw that bounced off the rim. "This the baby daddy everyone's talking about?" Isabel nodded, grateful that Mrs. Williams didn't seem shocked or disapproving. "He seems decent enough. Nervous but decent. Carlos likes him, and that boy's got good instincts about people." When the game finally ended, the kids winning by about 30 points, Frances walked back over, slightly out of breath and smiling more genuinely than Isabel had seen before. "I haven't played basketball since high school," he said, wiping sweat from his forehead with his sleeve. "I'm definitely out of practice." "You were great," Isabel said, and meant it. "Carlos will be talking about this for weeks." They continued their walk, the atmosphere between them noticeably lighter. Frances asked questions about the neighborhood, its history, the challenges it faced, the things Isabel loved about it. His interest seemed genuine, and his questions showed he'd been listening to her answers. "There's something I want to show you," Isabel said as they turned onto her street. "But I need you to promise me something first." "What?" "Don't offer to fix it. Don't talk about funding or solutions or how your company could help. Just see it." Frances nodded, though he looked puzzled. Isabel led him to Marcus Elementary, a solid brick building that had seen better decades. The playground equipment was older but well-maintained, the painted murals bright despite some fading. But Frances could see what Isabel meant. The windows that needed replacing, the portable classrooms that had become permanent, the chain-link fence held together with zip ties in places. "How many students?" he asked quietly. 432 this year. Kindergarten through 5th grade. Isabel leaned against the fence, her hands wrapping around the metal links. 93% qualify for free lunch. Average class size is 28 kids, but I've had as many as 35. Frances was quiet, taking in the building, the neighborhood around it, the reality of public education in an underfunded district. "You love them," he said finally. It wasn't a question. "Every single one. Even the ones who drive me crazy, who test my patience, who come to school angry because their world is hard. Especially those ones." "What's the hardest part?" Isabel considered the question. "Knowing how much potential they have and watching the system fail to nurture it. Seeing brilliant kids who could do anything if they just had the right support, the right opportunities, the right resources. And knowing that some of them won't get those things because of circumstances completely beyond their control. Is that why you wanted to be a mother? To give one child all of that support?" "Partly. But also because I wanted to love someone completely, without reservation or condition. I wanted to be the safe place someone comes home to." Francis was quiet for a long moment, his eyes still fixed on the school building. "I don't think I've ever been anyone's safe place," he said finally. "Maybe you haven't had the chance yet." They stood in comfortable silence, watching a maintenance worker tend to the small garden that had been planted beside the main entrance. The flowers were simple, marigolds and petunias, but they added a splash of color to the utilitarian landscape. "Isabelle," Francis said suddenly, "would you be willing to let me take you somewhere? Show you something from my world?" She looked at him, seeing something vulnerable in his expression. "Where?" "My office. But not during a meeting or formal presentation. I want you to see what I actually do all day, understand the decisions I'm making and why." He paused. "I think you'd be good at it actually. Seeing the bigger picture, asking the right questions." "Why does that matter to you?" "Because I think we're both living in worlds that the other doesn't understand. And if we're going to figure out how to do this, how to raise a child together across all these differences, maybe we need to really see each other first." Isabelle felt the baby move, a gentle flutter that seemed like encouragement. "Okay," she said. "But I get to ask questions. Lots of them. I wouldn't expect anything less." The Alderidge Tower stretched 43 floors into the Detroit skyline, its glass and steel facade reflecting the afternoon sun like a mirror. Isabelle had passed the building countless times on her way downtown but had never imagined she'd step inside, much less ride the private elevator to the executive floors. "Nervous?" Francis asked as they ascended past floors dedicated to various departments: accounting, legal, human resources, development. "Curious," Isabelle corrected, though her hand instinctively moved to her belly. At 26 weeks, every new experience felt filtered through the awareness that she wasn't just representing herself anymore. The elevator opened directly into Francis's office suite, and Isabelle's first thought was that it looked nothing like the sterile conference rooms where they'd first met. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, and the furniture was modern but comfortable, clearly chosen by someone who spent long hours here. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with an eclectic mix of business texts, history books, and what looked like science fiction novels. "You read Isaac Asimov?" Isabelle asked, running her finger along the book spines. "Guilty pleasure. The Foundation series got me through freshman year of college." Francis looked slightly embarrassed. "My roommate was convinced I was some kind of closet nerd." "Were you?" "Probably." He gestured toward a seating area with comfortable chairs and a coffee table covered in reports and tablets. "This is where I actually work. The big desk is mostly for show." Isabelle settled into one of the chairs, accepting the bottle of water Francis offered. "So what exactly do you do up here all day?" "Today? I reviewed 3 development proposals, had a conference call with investors about a renewable energy project in Grand Rapids, and spent 2 hours arguing with my board about a low-income housing initiative they think is too risky." "Too risky how?" Francis picked up one of the tablets, swiping to find the relevant documents. "We want to build affordable housing units in 6 different neighborhoods across Detroit. Good construction, solar panels, community spaces. But the profit margins are thin, and some board members think we should focus on luxury developments instead." Isabelle looked at the plans he showed her, modest but well-designed apartments with energy-efficient features and shared gardens. "These look nice. What's the real objection?" "Money. Always money. They're afraid we won't see adequate returns on investment." Francis set the tablet aside, frustration evident in his voice. "Never mind that people need decent places to live, or that we could help revitalize neighborhoods that banks won't even look at anymore. So what happens now?" "I keep pushing. Use my position as CEO to override their concerns if necessary. But it creates tension, makes future projects harder to get approved." Isabelle studied his face, seeing the weight of constant decision-making that affected thousands of people. "Is it always like that? Fighting to do what you think is right?" "More often than I'd like." Francis moved to the windows, looking out over the city spread below them. "My father built this company on the principle that profit was the only metric that mattered. Good for shareholders, good for the bottom line. Period. But I keep thinking about legacy, about what kind of world we're creating." "What changed your mind?" Francis was quiet for a moment. "A site visit, actually. 3 years ago, we demolished some old housing to build luxury condos in Corktown. I went to oversee the project and met this woman, probably about your age, who was being displaced. She had 2 kids, worked 2 jobs, and couldn't find anywhere affordable to move. She wasn't angry, just tired. Resigned to the fact that people like me make decisions about people like her without ever considering the human cost. Did you help her? I tried. Found her a place, helped with the deposit and first few months' rent. But it was a band-aid on a much bigger problem. That night I went home to my empty penthouse and realized I was part of a system that pushes people out instead of lifting them up. Isabel felt something shift in her understanding of this man. That's when you started the affordable housing projects? Among other things. We've also funded after-school programs, job training initiatives, small business loans for minority-owned companies. Turns out you can do well financially while also doing good socially, but convincing a room full of investors of that. He shrugged. It's an ongoing battle. You could just do what's profitable. Make everyone happy. I could. But then I'd have to look at myself in the mirror every morning knowing I chose the easy path over the right one. Francis returned to his chair, meeting Isabel's eyes directly. Besides, I keep thinking about our daughter. What kind of world do I want to leave her? What kind of example do I want to set? The mention of their child made Isabel's heart skip. It was still surreal, hearing him talk about their daughter as if she belonged to both of them. Can I see the other projects? She asked. For the next hour, Francis walked her through the various initiatives his company was pursuing. A job training center that partnered with local high schools, a microloan program for women entrepreneurs, plans for a community center that would offer everything from daycare to adult education classes. Isabel found herself asking detailed questions about implementation, sustainability, community input. You really did think this through, she said, impressed despite herself. I had good motivation. Francis saved the documents they'd been reviewing. But I also had resources most people don't have access to. Sometimes I wonder if I'm just playing with house money, trying to solve problems I helped create in the first place. Maybe that's exactly why you should be the one solving them. You understand how the system works from the inside. Is that what you tell your students when they get frustrated? That they can change things? Isabel smiled. I tell them that change starts with one person deciding to do better. Then another person. Then another. Eventually you have enough people doing better that the whole system starts to shift. Sounds like something a good teacher would say. Sounds like something a good leader would do. Francis looked surprised by the compliment. You really think what I'm doing matters? I think you're trying to use your privilege for something meaningful instead of just accumulating more wealth. That's rare from what I've seen. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the afternoon sun slanting through the windows and casting long shadows across the office. Isabel could see her neighborhood from here, a small cluster of buildings in the distance that looked almost picturesque from this height. Francis, she said suddenly, can I ask you something personal? Haven't you been doing that all afternoon? Isabel smiled. Fair point. But this is different. Do you ever get lonely up here? Making all these decisions by yourself? The question seemed to catch him off guard. He was quiet for a long time, his gaze fixed on something beyond the windows. Every day, he said finally. I have advisors, assistants, board members, department heads. Hundreds of people who depend on me for their livelihoods. But very few who actually know me. And none who can understand the weight of choosing between profit and principle every single day. That sounds exhausting. It is. But it's also the only way I know how to honor what my father built while trying to be better than he was. Isabel felt the baby move, a strong kick that made her gasp slightly. She's active today, Francis observed. She likes your voice, Isabel said without thinking, then felt her cheeks warm. I mean, she moves when people are talking. She'll probably be very social. Like her mother. Like both her parents, maybe? Francis's smile was soft and genuine. Maybe so. Hey everyone. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, telling us where you're watching from. We'd love to hear your thoughts and keep the conversation going. The Marcus Elementary faculty meeting was running late as usual. Isabel shifted uncomfortably in the too small plastic chair, her growing belly making it harder to find a comfortable position. At 28 weeks, she was entering the phase where everything required more planning. Bathroom breaks, comfortable seating, shoes that still fit. Before we adjourn, Principal Martinez announced, I have some news. We've received an unexpected donation that will fund our after-school reading program for the next 3 years. plus provide new books for every classroom and establish a weekend tutoring center. A murmur of excitement ran through the room. Funding was always scarce and donations of this magnitude were almost unheard of. The donor wishes to remain anonymous, Martinez continued, but they've requested that Ms. Davis oversee the program expansion, given her experience with our current initiatives. Isabel's stomach dropped. She had a terrible suspicion about the source of this anonymous donation, especially when she caught Martinez giving her a meaningful look. After the meeting, Isabel cornered her principal in the hallway. "Dr. Martinez, I need to know who made that donation." "You heard me, they want to remain anonymous." "Was it Frances Alderidge?" Martinez's silence was answer enough. "I can't accept this," Isabel said, her voice tight with frustration. "I can't have him throwing money at my school like I'm some charity case." "Isabel, this isn't about you. It's about 400 kids who desperately need these resources. Are you really going to turn down help because of your pride?" The words stung because they contained truth. Isabel thought about her students: Jaden, who was finally reading at grade level; Maria, who stayed after school because home wasn't safe; Carlos, whose grandmother worked 2 jobs and couldn't help with homework. They deserved every advantage she could give them. But the donation felt like manipulation, like Frances was trying to buy his way into her good graces by helping her students. That evening, Isabel called him. "We need to talk," she said without preamble. "Hello to you too. Is everything okay?" The baby is fine. But I know what you did at my school." There was a pause. That's all you have to say? Would you prefer to have this conversation in person?" An hour later, they sat in Frances's car outside Isabel's apartment building. She'd refused to go upstairs. This felt too much like a confrontation for the intimacy of her living room. "You had no right," she began, but Frances held up a hand. "You're right. I should have asked first." The easy admission deflated some of her anger. "Then why didn't you?" "Because I knew you'd say no. And because I wanted to do something that mattered, something that would help the kids you care about so much." Frances turned in his seat to face her fully. "Isabel, I've been thinking about everything you showed me, everything you said about your students and their potential. I can't fix poverty or inequality, but I can make sure those kids have books and tutoring and safe spaces to learn. It feels like you're trying to buy me." "I'm not. I'm trying to be useful. I'm trying to take all this privilege and money and guilt and turn it into something that actually helps people." His voice grew frustrated. "Do you know what it's like to have more resources than you could spend in 10 lifetimes while watching kids go without basic educational materials?" Isabel studied his face in the dim light from the street lamp. "You could have donated to any school in the city. Why mine?" "Because you made me see those kids as individuals, not statistics. Because you showed me what good teaching looks like and how much difference one person can make." Frances ran a hand through his hair. "And yes, because I wanted to support something that matters to you. Is that so wrong?" "It's complicated. Everything about this situation is complicated." Isabel felt the baby move, a rolling sensation that had become familiar. Their daughter seemed to be more active during their conversations, as if she could sense the emotional intensity. "I don't want to be one of your projects," Isabel said quietly. "You're not. This isn't charity, Isabel, it's investment. Investment in kids who deserve better, in a teacher who's changing lives every day, in a future that includes our daughter." Frances leaned forward slightly. "I've been making business decisions for 7 years, but I've never made one that felt as right as this one does. The school board will want to know who donated. There will be recognition ceremonies, publicity. Then we tell them. I'm done hiding from this, from us, from whatever we're becoming." Frances met her eyes directly. "Are you?" The question hung between them, loaded with implications that went far beyond school funding. "I don't know what we're becoming," Isabel admitted. "Neither do I. But I know I want to find out." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken possibilities settling around them. "There are conditions," Isabel said finally. "Name them." "I oversee how the money gets spent. Every penny. And if I think you're trying to influence curriculum or hiring or any educational decisions, the donation gets returned." "Agreed. And you don't get to use this for publicity. No press releases about the generous billionaire helping inner-city schools. I wouldn't dream of it. And..." Isabel hesitated, then forged ahead. "You have to keep coming around. Not just for meetings or official stuff. If you're going to be part of our world, you need to really be part of it. Show up for reading celebrations and science fairs and field days. Frances looked surprised. You want me to be involved? I want our daughter to see her father caring about education, about community, about the things that matter to regular people. Not just board meetings and profit margins. She's not even born yet. She will be. And when she is, I want her to be proud of both her parents. Frances was quiet for a long moment. What if I'm not good at it? The school events, interacting with families, being normal? Then you'll learn. Same way you learned to play basketball with Carlos and his friends. I was terrible at basketball. But you tried. And you kept trying until the game was over. Isabelle smiled slightly. That's all any of us can do. Okay, Frances said. I'll be there. For all of it. Good. Isabelle reached for the door handle, then paused. Frances. Yes. Thank you. For the donation. The kids really do need it, and it will make a huge difference. You're welcome. And Isabelle? Yeah. For what it's worth, I think she's lucky. Our daughter. To have you as her mother. Isabelle felt warmth spread through her chest. I think she might be lucky to have both of us. As she walked toward her building, Isabelle realized something had shifted between them tonight. They weren't just two people connected by an accidental pregnancy anymore. They were becoming partners, co-conspirators in raising a child, and maybe, possibly, something more. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, for the first time since this all began, it felt like hope. The invitation arrived on thick, cream-colored paper that felt expensive between Isabelle's fingers. The Detroit Education Foundation was hosting their annual gala, and they wanted her as their keynote speaker. Something about innovative teaching methods in challenging environments, and the power of community investment in education. Isabelle stared at the invitation in her kitchen, coffee growing cold in her hands. 6 months ago, she'd never heard of the Detroit Education Foundation. Now they wanted her to address 300 of the city's most influential people about education reform. This is about the donation, isn't it? She said into her phone. Frances had answered on the second ring, which was becoming normal for their increasingly frequent conversations. Partly, he admitted. Word got around about the results you're seeing at Marcus Elementary. Test scores up 15%, reading levels improving, parent engagement through the roof. People notice success stories. People with money notice success stories. Is that necessarily a bad thing? Isabelle sank into her chair, one hand resting on her belly. At 30 weeks, their daughter was making her presence known with increasingly vigorous movements. I don't know how to talk to wealthy people about poverty, Frances. I don't know how to explain why kids come to school hungry or why some parents can't attend conferences because they're working 3 jobs. Then don't explain it. Show them. Tell them about specific kids, specific moments. Tell them about Jaden's poetry or Maria's science project or Carlos's terrible jokes. And then what? They write checks and feel good about themselves? Some will. Others might actually get involved, volunteer time, change policies at their own companies. You won't know until you try. Isabelle found herself considering it. The platform would be huge, a chance to advocate for her students and others like them across the city. But the thought of standing in front of all those people, visibly pregnant and representing everything they probably thought was wrong with public education, made her stomach churn. Will you be there? She asked. If you want me to be. I might need backup. Someone who speaks their language. I can translate from rich person to human if necessary. Despite her anxiety, Isabelle smiled. When did you get a sense of humor? I've always had one. I just never had anyone worth sharing it with. The comment hung in the air between them, loaded with implications neither was quite ready to address directly. 2 weeks later, Isabelle stood backstage at the Detroit Opera House, smoothing her dress, a deep blue maternity gown that Frances had insisted on buying after she complained about having nothing appropriate to wear. The backstage area buzzed with activity as servers prepared for the cocktail reception and tech crews tested sound equipment. You look beautiful, Frances said, appearing beside her in an elegant tuxedo that probably cost more than Isabelle's monthly rent. I look like a pregnant teacher playing dress-up. You look like a woman who's about to change some minds. Isabelle peeked through a gap in the curtains at the crowd gathering in the ornate theater. Designer gowns, expensive suits, jewelry that caught the light like tiny stars. They're not going to listen to me. They're going to listen because you have something they don't: authenticity. Real stories about real kids. Most of these people write checks to ease their consciences, but they've never actually met the children their money is supposed to help. What if I mess up? What if I say the wrong thing? Frances stepped closer, his presence steady and reassuring. Then you'll be human. Which is exactly what they need to see. The introduction seemed to last forever, full of Isabel's credentials and accomplishments that sounded inflated in the formal language of foundation speak. When she finally walked onto the stage, the lights were so bright she could barely make out individual faces in the audience. She began with Jaden, the boy who couldn't read at the beginning of 3rd grade but who now devoured chapter books and wrote stories about dragons who taught math. She told them about Maria, whose parents spoke only Spanish but who stayed after school every day to help clean classrooms because education was the family's pathway to a better life. She spoke about Carlos, whose humor masked deep anxiety about his grandmother's health but who still made everyone laugh during the hardest lessons. These aren't statistics, Isabel said, finding her rhythm as the audience grew quiet and attentive. They're not problems to be solved or populations to be managed. They're brilliant, complex, deserving children who happen to live in a system that consistently underestimates their potential. She talked about the weekend tutoring program funded by an anonymous donor, and how it had become more than just academic support. It was a community center, a safe space, a place where parents learned alongside their children. She described the moment when Jaden's grandmother, who had never learned to read herself, successfully helped him with his homework for the first time. Education isn't just about test scores or graduation rates, Isabel continued, her confidence growing with each word. It's about giving every child the tools to imagine a different future and the support to reach for it. It's about believing in potential even when the circumstances make that belief difficult. The applause was immediate and sustained. Isabel saw people in the audience wiping their eyes, leaning forward in their seats, genuinely moved by the stories she'd shared. During the reception afterward, Isabel found herself surrounded by people wanting to know more about her programs, her methods, her students. A technology executive talked about providing laptops for the tutoring center. A retired teacher offered to volunteer. A local business owner asked about creating internship opportunities for older students. See, Frances appeared at her elbow with a glass of sparkling water. You didn't just ask for money, you created connections. I think I actually enjoyed it, Isabel admitted, surprised by the realization. You were incredible up there. Natural. I had good material. Those kids deserve to have their stories told. And you deserve to be the one telling them. Isabel, what you're doing, it's not just teaching. It's leadership. You're changing how people think about education, about community, about what's possible. Isabel looked around the reception, watching wealthy donors engage in animated conversations with teachers and community organizers. Maybe this is what partnership looks like. Not just throwing money at problems but actually connecting with the people doing the work. Maybe it is. Frances paused, then said quietly, I'm proud of you. Tonight, but also everything you've accomplished with your students. Our daughter is going to be lucky to have you as a role model. The comment sent warmth through Isabel's chest. She'll have both of us as role models. That's turning out better than I expected. Much better, Frances agreed, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. As the evening wound down, Isabel realized something fundamental had shifted. She was no longer just a teacher who happened to be having a baby with a billionaire. She was becoming someone who could bridge both worlds, translate between them, create change that neither could accomplish alone. And Frances was becoming more than just a financial partner in their child's future. He was becoming her partner in ways she was only beginning to understand. The contraction started during Isabel's 7th period class on a Thursday afternoon in late February. She was helping Destiny with a math problem when the pain hit, sharp and demanding, wrapping around her belly like a vice. Isabel gripped the edge of the desk, breathing through it until it passed. Miss Davis? Destiny looked concerned. You okay? Just fine, sweetheart. Let's finish this problem. But 20 minutes later, another contraction came, stronger than the first. Isabel glanced at the clock, still 6 weeks until her due date. This couldn't be labor. It had to be false alarms, the Braxton Hicks contractions her doctor had warned her about. By the time she dismissed her students, Isabel was having contractions every 15 minutes. She sat at her desk, timing them with growing anxiety until her phone rang. "How was your day?" Frances asked, and Isabel realized he'd started calling her every afternoon around this time, just to check in. "Complicated," she said, trying to keep her voice steady as another wave of pain began. "What's wrong?" "I think I might be in early labor." There was a pause, then the sound of movement, chairs scraping, papers rustling. "Where are you?" "Still at school." "But Frances, it's too early." "I'm coming to get you." "Stay where you are." "You don't need to." "Isabel." His voice was firm but gentle. "I'm coming." He arrived 20 minutes later, slightly out of breath and looking more disheveled than she'd ever seen him. His usually perfect hair was messy, his tie askew, and there was genuine fear in his eyes. "How far apart are the contractions?" 10 minutes now." Isabel let him help her stand, grateful for his steady presence as another wave hit. "This isn't supposed to happen yet." "Babies don't read calendars," Frances said, attempting lightness as he guided her toward the door. "My car's outside. I can drive myself." "No, you can't." The firmness in his voice brooked no argument. "We're going to the hospital, and I'm staying with you until we know what's happening." The drive to Henry Ford Hospital passed in a blur of contractions and traffic lights. Frances kept one hand on the wheel and the other reaching over to squeeze Isabel's fingers whenever the pain got bad. "Call Dr. Chin," Isabel managed between contractions. "Her number's in my phone." "Already did. She's meeting us there." In the triage room, Dr. Chin confirmed what Isabel had feared. She was in active labor, dilated to 4 centimeters and progressing quickly. "We need to slow this down," Dr. Chin explained, checking Isabel's chart. 34 weeks is manageable, but we'd prefer to keep her cooking a little longer if possible." They admitted Isabel to the labor and delivery ward, starting medications to try to stop the contractions. Frances never left her side, holding her hand through the uncomfortable procedures and speaking quietly to her when the fear threatened to overwhelm her rational mind. "She's going to be okay," he murmured during a particularly strong contraction. "She's strong like her mother. What if she's not ready? What if something goes wrong? Then we'll handle it. Together." The simple certainty in his voice steadied something inside Isabel. When had she started depending on his presence? When had we become natural? By evening, the medications had slowed her labor but not stopped it completely. Dr. Chin ordered bed rest and monitoring, explaining that they'd try to keep the baby in for at least another week if possible. "I should call my principal," Isabel said, reaching for her phone. "Let him know I won't be in tomorrow." "I already called." Explained the situation. Frances looked slightly embarrassed. "I hope that was okay." "I know his number because of the donation paperwork." "You called my boss?" "I called him as the father of your child who wants to make sure you don't have to worry about work while you're trying to keep our daughter safe." The possessive language, "your child, our daughter," sent something warm through Isabel's chest. "What did you tell him?" "That you're having some complications and need to rest. That I'd make sure any substitute teacher had detailed lesson plans. That your students are in good hands." "You know about substitute lesson plans?" Frances smiled sheepishly. "I may have researched teacher protocols after you mentioned how much work it is to be absent. I wanted to understand what you deal with." Isabel stared at him. "When?" "A few weeks ago. I was curious about your job, the real mechanics of it. Did you know that teachers spend an average of 12 hours planning for every hour they're absent? That seemed insane to me." "So you researched teaching?" "I researched a lot of things. Child development, pregnancy complications, lactation consultants, pediatric care, sleep training methods." Frances looked embarrassed but continued. "I figured if I was going to be a father, I should probably know what that meant." Something cracked open in Isabel's chest. "You've been reading parenting books?" "Dr. Sears is very thorough. Though I'm pretty sure his advice about co-sleeping doesn't account for billionaire fathers with control issues." Isabel laughed despite the worry and discomfort. "Control issues? I've had 3 different baby-proofing companies assess my penthouse. Apparently, glass coffee tables and marble floors aren't considered child-friendly." "Frances." Isabel reached for his hand, threading their fingers together. "You don't have to change your whole life." "Yes, I do. My whole life is changing whether I plan for it or not. I'd rather be prepared." A contraction hit, milder than earlier but still uncomfortable. Frances squeezed her hand and breathed with her until it passed. "What if I'm not ready to be a mother?" Isabel asked quietly. "What if I mess this up?" "You won't. You've been mothering kids for years. Your students adore you, trust you, learn from you. Our daughter will too." "That's different. Those aren't my kids." "Aren't they though?" Frances smoothed a strand of hair from her face. "The way you talk about them, fight for them, celebrate their successes? That's love, Isabel. Pure, unconditional love. Our daughter will be lucky to have that." Isabel felt tears prick her eyes. "When did you become so wise about feelings?" "When I met someone worth having feelings for." The admission hung between them, honest and vulnerable. Isabel looked at this man who had somehow become essential to her life, who called her every day, who researched teaching methods and parenting strategies, who dropped everything to rush to her side when she needed him. "Frances," she said softly. "Yeah. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad it's you. Even though I'm complicated and wealthy and probably going to mess up the father thing in spectacular ways? Especially because of that. Our daughter should know that people can surprise you. That sometimes the most unexpected things turn out to be exactly what you need." Frances leaned down and kissed her forehead, soft and careful. "Get some rest. We need to keep her in there a little longer. We. From now on, everything we do together." Isabel closed her eyes, feeling safer than she had since the contractions started. Somewhere along the way, without either of them quite realizing it, they had become a team. A family. And maybe, possibly, something even more precious than that. Isabel's water broke at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in March, exactly 36 weeks into her pregnancy. She woke to the sensation of warm fluid and the immediate knowledge that this was it. No false alarms this time, no medications to stop what was happening. Their daughter had decided she was ready to meet the world. Frances answered his phone on the first ring, his voice instantly alert despite the early hour. "It's time," Isabel said simply. "I'm on my way." By the time he arrived at her apartment, Isabel was dressed and had her hospital bag by the door. The contractions were coming every 5 minutes, strong enough to make her pause and breathe through them. "How long?" Frances asked, taking her bag and helping her into his car. "Since about 4. They're getting stronger." Isabel gripped the door handle as another wave hit. "She's really coming, Frances." "She's coming," he agreed, and Isabel could hear the mix of excitement and terror in his voice that matched her own feelings exactly. The pre-dawn drive to the hospital passed in a blur of contractions and quiet conversation. Frances kept stealing glances at her, his knuckles white where he gripped the steering wheel. "You know," Isabel said during a break between contractions, "we never talked about what happens after. When we take her home." "What do you mean?" "I mean logistics. Where does she sleep? Who gets up for night feedings? What does co-parenting actually look like when one parent lives in a penthouse and the other lives in a one-bedroom apartment?" Frances pulled into the hospital parking garage, choosing a spot close to the elevators. "We figure it out as we go. Together." "That's not very billionaire-like of you. Don't you people usually have detailed plans for everything?" "Usually. But nothing about this situation has been usual." He came around to help her out of the car, his hand steady on her elbow. "Besides, I've learned that the best things in life don't follow the plan." In the labor and delivery room, Dr. Chin confirmed that Isabel was progressing quickly, already dilated to 7 centimeters and fully effaced. "This baby is eager to meet you," she said with a smile. "We're looking at maybe 3 or 4 more hours." Frances settled into the chair beside Isabel's bed, rolling up his sleeves like he was preparing for the most important business meeting of his life. "You don't have to stay for the actual delivery," Isabel said during a quiet moment. "I know some men prefer." "I'm staying." Frances's voice was firm. "Unless you don't want me here." "I want you here." "I just thought maybe—" Another contraction cut off her words, stronger than any before. Frances was there immediately, letting her squeeze his hand and breathing with her until it passed. "Isabel," he said when she relaxed again, "there is nowhere else in the world I would rather be right now. Nowhere." As labor progressed, the careful boundaries they'd maintained began to dissolve. Frances wiped her forehead with cool cloths, helped her change positions, spoke quietly to her during the hardest contractions. When the pain became overwhelming and Isabel cried that she couldn't do it anymore, Frances held her face in his hands. "Look at me," he said firmly. You are the strongest person I know. You teach kids that they can do hard things, right? This is your hard thing and you can do it. What if something goes wrong? What if she needs surgery or the NICU or... Then we'll handle it. Whatever she needs, whatever you need. I'm not going anywhere. The absolute certainty in his voice steadied something inside Isabelle. When had she started believing in his promises? When had his presence become the thing that made her feel safe? At 2:17 p.m., after 12 hours of labor that felt like both a lifetime and an instant, their daughter arrived in the world screaming her displeasure at the bright lights and cold air. Dr. Chin placed her immediately on Isabelle's chest and everything else, the pain, the exhaustion, the months of uncertainty, fell away. "Oh," Isabelle whispered, staring down at the tiny, perfect face. "Oh, she's beautiful." Francis stood beside the bed, tears streaming down his face, looking like a man who had just witnessed a miracle. "She's perfect," he managed. "Isabelle, she's absolutely perfect." The baby was smaller than full-term but healthy, 5 pounds 2 ounces of perfect fingers and toes, and the most beautiful cry Isabelle had ever heard. When the nurses had finished their initial assessments, they placed her back in Isabelle's arms. "Does she have a name?" the nurse asked, preparing the birth certificate paperwork. Isabelle looked up at Francis, realizing they'd somehow never had this conversation. "What do you think?" Francis reached out tentatively to touch one tiny hand. "I was thinking, maybe Sophia? It means wisdom." "Sophia?" Isabelle repeated, testing the name. Their daughter seemed to settle at the sound of it, her crying quieting to soft mewling sounds. "Sophia Davis Alderidge? If that's what you want. I want her to know she belongs to both of us. All of us." Francis leaned down to kiss Isabelle's forehead, then pressed a gentle kiss to Sophia's tiny head. "She does belong to all of us. We're a family. A very unconventional family," Isabelle said with a tired smile. "The best kind." Later, after the visitors had gone and the nurses had finished their checks, Isabelle and Francis sat in the quiet hospital room watching their daughter sleep in the plastic bassinet beside the bed. The late afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting everything in golden light. "Francis," Isabelle said quietly, "I need to tell you something." "What?" "I'm falling in love with you." The words came out in a rush, honest and inevitable. "I don't know when it started or how to handle it, but I needed you to know." Francis was quiet for a long moment, his gaze moving from their sleeping daughter to Isabelle's face. "I fell in love with you weeks ago," he said finally. "Maybe that first day at the coffee shop when you challenged everything I thought I knew about strength and purpose and what really matters. What does this mean for us? It means we stop pretending this is just about co-parenting. It means we stop being careful about feelings and start being honest about what we want." "And what do you want?" Francis stood and moved to sit on the edge of Isabelle's hospital bed, taking her hand in both of his. "I want to wake up every morning in the same house as both of you. I want to teach Sophia how to ride a bike and help her with math homework and embarrass her with dad jokes when she brings boys home. I want to support your teaching and your programs and your dreams, and I want you to challenge me to be better than I ever thought I could be." Isabelle felt her heart expand in her chest. "That's a lot to want. It's everything I want. The question is, what do you want?" Isabelle looked at their daughter, sleeping peacefully between them, then at Francis, this man who had surprised her at every turn, who had become her partner and her closest friend and now, incredibly, the love of her life. "I want all of that too," she said. "Every bit of it." Francis smiled, the kind of smile that transformed his whole face. "Then let's figure out how to make it happen. Together? Together. Always together." 3 weeks after Sophia's birth, Isabelle stood in the doorway of what had been Francis's home office, watching him attempt to assemble a crib while their daughter napped in the portable bassinet nearby. He'd insisted on putting the furniture together himself, despite having access to any number of people who could have done it professionally. "The instructions are clearly written by someone who's never actually built furniture," Francis muttered, holding up 2 pieces that seemed identical but apparently weren't. "How can there be 17 different types of screws for one crib?" "You could ask Marcus to help," Isabelle suggested, referring to his building's maintenance supervisor, who had become unexpectedly fond of Sophia during their week-long stay at Francis's penthouse. "I can figure this out. I have 3 engineering degrees. And yet you've been working on that for 2 hours." Francis looked up at her, hair disheveled and shirt wrinkled, holding what appeared to be an upside-down piece of the crib rail. "Are you mocking my furniture assembly skills?" "I would never." Isabelle tried to keep a straight face. "I'm merely observing that our daughter might be walking before her crib is finished." "Very funny." But Frances was smiling as he said it, the kind of relaxed smile she'd seen more often since Sophia's arrival. Fatherhood was transforming him in ways Isabelle was still discovering, making him softer, more patient, less concerned with maintaining perfect control over every situation. Isabelle's phone buzzed with a text from her mother, "Bringing dinner at 6. Made enough for Frances too. Try to keep that man fed, he's too skinny." In the 3 weeks since Sophia's birth, Isabelle's mother had gone from suspicious of Frances's intentions to protective of his well-being. It had started when she'd arrived at the hospital to find him sleeping in the uncomfortable chair beside Isabelle's bed, having refused to leave even for a few hours. Now she regularly brought him care packages and lectured him about working too much. "Mom's coming for dinner," Isabelle announced. "She made enough for an army as usual. Should I change?" Frances gestured to his casual clothes, jeans and a t-shirt that had seen better days. "She's seen you in worse. Remember last week when Sophia had that diaper blowout that somehow got on both of us?" Frances grimaced at the memory. "I'm still not sure how that's physically possible. Parenthood defies the laws of physics. I thought you would have figured that out by now." The easy banter between them still surprised Isabelle sometimes. They'd fallen into domestic rhythms more naturally than she'd expected, sharing night feedings, taking turns with diaper changes, working together to decode Sophia's different cries. The adjustment to living together had been surprisingly smooth, probably because they were both too exhausted to overthink it. Frances had converted his study into a nursery and his guest room into Isabelle's space, though she'd been spending most nights in his bed anyway. Not for romance, they were both too tired for anything beyond stolen kisses and falling asleep tangled together, but for the comfort of shared responsibility and the simple pleasure of not facing the challenges of new parenthood alone. "Isabelle," Frances said, setting down the crib instructions and turning to face her fully, "we need to talk about what happens next." "What do you mean?" "I mean long-term. Your apartment lease is up next month and you've been here for 3 weeks. My mother is coming to visit next weekend, and she's going to have questions about our living arrangements." Isabelle felt a flutter of anxiety. They'd been operating in a kind of beautiful bubble since Sophia's birth, focused entirely on adjusting to life with a newborn. But reality was starting to intrude, practical questions about where they lived, how they structured their relationship, what they told their families and the world. "What kind of questions?" "The kind mothers ask. Whether we're planning to get married, when we're going to give Sophia siblings, if I'm being a proper gentleman about your reputation." "Your mother cares about my reputation?" Frances smiled ruefully. "My mother has very strong opinions about appropriate behavior. She also has very strong opinions about the fact that I'm 32 and haven't produced any grandchildren until now." "And what do you want to tell her?" Frances abandoned the crib entirely, coming to sit beside Isabelle on the couch. "I want to tell her that I love you. That I love our daughter. That I want to spend the rest of my life figuring out how to be the best father and partner I can be. But I also want to make sure that's what you want. Not because you feel obligated or because it's convenient, but because you actually want to build a life with me." Isabelle looked across the room at Sophia, sleeping peacefully in her bassinet, tiny fists curled near her face. Their daughter was perfect, healthy and alert, and already showing signs of having inherited both her parents' stubborn streaks. "Frances, 3 months ago I thought I was going to be a single mother. I'd made peace with that, planned for it, prepared myself for every challenge I'd face alone." She turned to meet his eyes. "Now I can't imagine doing this without you. Not just the parenting, all of it. The late-night conversations, the way you make me laugh when I'm too tired to function, the way you've supported my work and my dreams. Is that a yes to building a life together?" "It's a yes to everything. The complicated logistics, the judgmental in-laws, the media attention when they figure out we're actually together. All of it." Frances leaned over to kiss her, soft and sweet. "Even the part where I'm terrible at assembling furniture?" "Especially that part. Someone has to keep you humble." "I love you," he said against her lips. "Both of you. More than I knew it was possible to love anyone. We love you too." A knock at the door interrupted them, Isabelle's mother arriving with what was undoubtedly enough food for a week. Frances stood to answer it, but paused with his hand on the doorknob. Isabel? When your mother asks about our plans and she will ask, what should I tell her? Isabel smiled, feeling more certain than she had about anything in months. Tell her you're planning to make an honest woman of me. Eventually. When we've both had more than 3 hours of consecutive sleep. Is that a proposal? It's a promise. When the time is right, when we're ready, when Sophia is old enough to be our flower girl, we'll make it official. Frances opened the door to greet Isabel's mother, but not before giving Isabel a smile that promised everything she'd ever wanted and several things she hadn't known she needed. Mrs. Davis, Frances said warmly, taking the casserole dishes from her arms. Perfect timing. I was just about to prove that love conquers all, including IKEA furniture instructions. Oh honey, Isabel's mother patted his cheek affectionately. Love is wonderful, but sometimes you just need better tools. Isabel, get that man a proper screwdriver before he hurts himself. As her mother bustled into the kitchen and Frances returned to wrestling with the crib, Isabel realized this was what family looked like. Not perfect, not planned, but real and messy and absolutely right. They'd found their way to each other through the most unlikely circumstances, but they'd found their way nonetheless. And they were just getting started. The September morning sun streamed through the windows of Isabel's new classroom at the Alderidge Community Learning Center, illuminating walls covered with student artwork and motivational posters. Isabel stood at the front of the room, watching her third graders work on their math problems, marveling at how much had changed in just 6 months. The Learning Center had been Frances's idea, a public-private partnership that combined the best of both worlds. It operated within the Detroit public school system but with additional funding and resources that allowed for smaller class sizes, extended hours, and innovative programs. Isabel had been nervous about leaving Marcus Elementary, but the opportunity to help design a school from the ground up had been too compelling to pass up. Miss Isabel. Jaden, now in 4th grade, poked his head through her classroom door. My new teacher says you might have some of those good pencils for my writing project. Isabel smiled, reaching into her desk drawer. Jaden was part of the after-school program now, thriving in the expanded creative writing workshops they'd been able to implement. The ones with the good erasers? Those are the ones. He grinned, missing another tooth since she'd last seen him. Thanks. Oh, and there's some fancy lady here asking for you. She's got a baby with her. Isabel's heart skipped. Frances's mother had called yesterday, mentioning she might stop by during her visit to Detroit. Eleanor Alderidge was still an unknown quantity, polite but reserved during their few previous encounters, clearly still processing the unconventional way her son had become a father. Tell her I'll be right there, okay? Isabel found Eleanor in the main hallway, holding 6-month-old Sophia with the careful competence of someone who'd raised children long ago. Sophia was babbling happily, reaching for her grandmother's pearl necklace with determined focus. Mrs. Alderidge, Isabel said, smoothing her dress. What a lovely surprise. Please call me Eleanor. We're family now, aren't we? The older woman's smile was warmer than usual. I hope you don't mind the unexpected visit. Frances is in meetings all day and I wanted to see where you work. Of course. Would you like a tour? They walked through the building together, Isabel explaining the different programs while Eleanor asked surprisingly detailed questions about curriculum design and student outcomes. Sophia provided a running commentary in baby gibberish, clearly enjoying the attention from both women. This is impressive, Eleanor said as they entered the library, where a group of kindergartners was having story time. Frances mentioned you'd helped design the educational model, but I didn't realize the scope. We wanted to create something that honored the existing community while providing resources that were previously unavailable, Isabel explained. It's been challenging but rewarding. Eleanor was quiet for a moment, watching the children listen raptly to their teacher. You know, I had my doubts initially. About the circumstances, about whether Frances was truly ready for this kind of responsibility. Isabel felt her defensive instincts flare but kept her voice neutral. And now I watch my son light up when he talks about his daughter's latest developmental milestones. I see him leaving the office at reasonable hours because he doesn't want to miss bath time. I watch him research everything from baby-led weaning to college savings plans with the same intensity he once reserved for business acquisitions. Eleanor shifted Sophia to her other arm. He's never been happier. He's a wonderful father, Isabel said truthfully. Very hands-on, very devoted. And you, my dear, are raising a beautiful, bright little girl while simultaneously revolutionizing education in this city. I'm not sure how you manage it all. The compliment caught Isabelle off guard. We help each other. That's what partners do. Is that what you are? Partners? Eleanor's question was gentle but direct. Isabelle considered how to answer. She and Frances had talked about marriage several times, but they'd agreed to wait until life settled into a more predictable rhythm. Still, they were committed to each other in every way that mattered. We're building something together, Isabelle said carefully. Something that works for our family. Eleanor smiled. That's very diplomatic. But I'm not asking as a society matron concerned about propriety. I'm asking as a grandmother who wants to know if the people raising her granddaughter are truly happy. We are, Isabelle said without hesitation. Very happy. It's not traditional, but it's ours. Good. Because I have something for you. Eleanor reached into her purse and pulled out a small velvet box. This was Frances's great-grandmother's engagement ring. I've been holding on to it for the right woman. Isabelle's eyes widened. Mrs. Alderidge, Eleanor, I can't accept this. Frances and I haven't even discussed. Oh, you haven't discussed marriage? How interesting. Eleanor's eyes twinkled with mischief. Because he asked for the ring last month. Heat flooded Isabelle's cheeks. He did. He wanted my blessing, which he has, and my great-grandmother's ring, which he also has. Though I suspect he's waiting for the right moment. Eleanor pressed the box into Isabelle's hands. Consider this a grandmother's prerogative to meddle in her son's romantic timing. Before Isabelle could protest further, Frances appeared in the library doorway, looking harried and slightly out of breath. Mom, I've been looking everywhere. He stopped short when he saw the velvet box in Isabelle's hands. Oh no. Oh yes, Eleanor said serenely. I decided to help things along. Mom, Frances said, his voice strangled. We talked about this. You talked about waiting for the perfect moment. I decided the perfect moment is now, in the school where Isabelle is changing children's lives, surrounded by the family you've both created. Eleanor stood, still holding Sophia. I'm going to take my granddaughter for ice cream while you two sort this out. She swept out of the library with remarkable dignity for someone who just orchestrated an impromptu proposal, leaving Frances and Isabelle staring at each other across a room full of kindergartners. Well, Isabelle said, holding up the ring box. This is unexpected. I'm going to kill my mother, Frances muttered, then seemed to remember where they were and lowered his voice. Isabelle, I'm sorry. I had plans, dinner, flowers, something romantic that wasn't in front of 5-year-olds. Were you really going to propose? I was going to ask you to marry me, yes. When the time felt right. Isabelle looked down at the velvet box, then up at the man who had become her partner in everything that mattered. Around them, kindergartners continued their story time, oblivious to the life-changing conversation happening nearby. The time feels right to me, she said quietly. Frances blinked. It does. We're in the school we built together with the students we're both committed to helping. Our daughter is with your mother, who apparently approves of me despite everything. I can't think of anywhere I'd rather be when you ask me the most important question of my life. Frances moved closer, taking the ring box from her hands. Isabel Davis, will you marry me? Will you let me love you and Sophia for the rest of my life? Will you help me keep becoming the man you both deserve? Yes, Isabelle said, laughing as tears spilled down her cheeks. Yes to all of it. The kindergartners burst into spontaneous applause, apparently having decided that whatever was happening was worth celebrating. Frances slipped the vintage ring onto Isabelle's finger, a perfect fit as if it had been waiting for her all along, and kissed her while children cheered around them. I love you, he whispered against her lips. I love you too. Both of you, you and your meddling mother. She means well. She means to have us married and producing more grandchildren as soon as possible. Frances grinned. Would that be so terrible? Ask me again in a year when Sophia is sleeping through the night. Deal? Frances said, kissing her again. I can wait. I'm good at waiting for things worth having. Good, Isabelle said, admiring the way her great-grandmother's ring caught the light. Because the best things in life are definitely worth waiting for. If this story touched your heart, remember, sometimes the smallest steps lead to the biggest changes. Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe and join us for more stories that prove compassion can change the world.